What is up, you guys? Teller checking it for 2024. It's a new year. It's been quite a while since I've been on this mic. It seems like it's been just about a month, maybe a week shy of a month since I have recorded one of these full card prediction videos. And I'm excited to be back on the mic. I hope all of you guys had a great New Year, great Christmas, whatever other holiday you guys celebrate. I hope you guys all had a great holiday season. First and foremost, hope all you guys are doing well out there. I've missed you guys. And, before I dive into this video, you guys know I usually give my parting words at the end, but I want to catch you guys now before we jump into this first fight. I just want to let you guys know, I've been on the road for a couple weeks. I just got back. So, this is all, everything's is a little bit back on me a little quick here, but I want to let you guys know I spent a lot of money on a lot of new equipment, and there's going to be some major renovations here on the channel, as well as on my Instagram and my Twitter. I got a lot of new equipment, spent some good money on it, and I have some big plans coming up for this upcoming year. So if you guys are looking to make some big changes and step your game up for the year 2024, you're going to want to be rolling with me throughout this year, man, because we're going to keep that energy all throughout it, okay? So there's going to be some big things going on here, all right? So unfortunately, I didn't have enough time to really set things up the way I wanted and to start for you guys to start seeing those changes for this video, because I want to get this video out to you now. But like I said, I've been on the road. I'm back in the lab now, and you guys can expect some big things. All right, we'll jump into the first fight here. If you guys can real quick, catch me on all my social media. I'm on Instagram, on Twitter. It's all scrolling below. And if you guys want to work with me for my official plays for any event, you guys reach out to me and you guys can check out my packages. All right, guys, missed you guys. Let's jump into this first fight.
Welcome to the show. This is the MMA fortune teller. Yeah.
The MMA fortune teller.
The teller.
Kicking the year off, we have a matchup taking place in the flyweight division between the UFC newcomer, the Brazilian Felipe Bunes, taking on Joshua Van the Kid, just 22 years old. He now has 2 victories inside the octagon, taking this fight on short notice, had about 2 weeks of notice by the time that he's going to be stepping into the cage. So, you take that into consideration, as Felipe was initially supposed to be taking on Denis Bandar. He also had a fight fall through with Zhalgas Zhumagulov. That would have been his UFC debut fight a while ago as well. And I think that Joshua Van is a stiffer competition compared to both those fighters there. Felipe Bunes is a fighter. Although you see here, it says that he only has 2 submission victories. You also note under it says unknown types of victories under that 6. I believe all 6 of those victories were somewhat clarified by other sources to be submission victories. So he definitely seems to be more of a submission threat, even though he's coming into this fight coming off a big victory over in the LFA where he knocked out Yuma Hiroyuchi. All right, so maybe his striking is starting to develop, but I would probably lean more towards the other way. He's 34 years old, and I don't think that his striking is going to be able to keep up with Joshua Van's. I've been very impressed with the striking I've seen from him. First and foremost, in his debut, he looked sharp right off the rip, coming in as an underdog against Zhalgas Zhumagulov. Basically, kicked Zhalgas out of the UFC. I haven't really looked too much further into that, but I believe that was the last time we're going to be seeing Zhalgas fight in the octagon after that loss. And then in his last fight, where he fought the very tough Kevin Borjas, Joshua Van started that fight pretty well, had a little mishap there. I believe he dropped the first round, got cracked with the shot. The way that he was able to get the train back on the tracks and finish the fight very strongly, winning the latter 2 rounds and landing 165 strikes throughout that fight, really just overwhelming Borjas with the volume on the feet. And I love the boxing. It's very crisp. It's very sharp. And I really just don't see the newcomer Felipe outstriking Van on the feet. I feel pretty damn confident that Van will get the better of those striking exchanges. It is the fight game, though. And with Van being a very offensive fighter, a very aggressive fighter, like we talked about in the Borjas fight, yes, there is a possibility that he can get clipped with the shot, but he's young. The chin seems very, very fresh, and I think that he'll be fine there. Where I could potentially see an issue in this fight for Van, as he is coming in as a decent favorite. We'll get to the line in a second. If there's going to be an issue, potentially, I'm not saying I see there being this issue, but I would say that it's if this fight could end up being just kind of a slugfest type of affair where Bunes can eventually mix in some grappling and maybe pull off some type of submission. You take a look at Joshua Van's one loss. It wasn't that long ago, actually. In fact, it was just in 2021, just a couple of years ago, where he was submitted by Devin Jackson, a fighter that doesn't even have a face picture here. So it was over in Fury FC. He's not really much of a respected fighter. He's 3-1, and he was able to get a rear naked choke victory, I do believe, on Joshua Van there. So I would say that's going to be something that could potentially be a threat to Van. We still need to see more of Van with just two UFC fights, under his belt right now. Obviously, he's not invincible, but I would say I feel pretty confident that Van's gonna take this fight, and even taking it on short notice. Okay, on my bookie, he opened as a -200. We see action steadily coming his way. He's now a -240. So people are high on the skill set of Van's here, right? You see action coming in on him, even as he takes this fight on short notice. I'm somewhat in agreement with it. But if this line gets out of hand, once it gets up to that -280 type of range, I might want to pump the brakes there. Again, he needs to prove more. He's very young, but skill for skill, especially on the feet where this fight's going to start. And Joshua Van's looked pretty good being able to keep the fight standing. He's going to be a step ahead of Felipe, in my opinion. Felipe throwing these kind of lackluster, loopy type shots, and just, he's long, and he will have a little bit of a reach and length advantage there. But I think that Van's just too crispy for him. Give me Joshua Van to win a unanimous decision, just pushing the pace and hitting Felipe up with that volume. In the lightweight division, the big train, Tom Nolan, makes his UFC debut, coming off a big-time Dana White's Contender Series knockout victory where he took on Bogdan Grad. That was a fun fight. If you guys remember Bogdan, the little Austrian pit bull, they really went at it from the moment that bell rung, and Tom Nolan got the better, of course. He now takes on Nikolas Motta, a fighter that is more than willing to engage. He's a fighter that is a boom or bust type of fighter, but a lot more busting going on as of recently. These days, he hasn't been looking that sharp, if you want to be honest. He was saved by the referee in his last fight against Trey Ogen. That was a fight where Trey was in complete control from the very beginning. He was outstriking Motta, where a lot of people thought that Trey might have had some type of grappling advantage, but not necessarily a striking advantage. So Motta, before that fight, got knocked out against Manuel Torres. He did sneak in a knockout victory over Cameron Van Camp. Not a UFC caliber fighter, in my opinion. Before that, he was knocked out by Jim Miller. And even if you want to look back at some of his earlier losses in his career, he is a fighter that has been finished. Robert Hale finished him back in the day. Antonio Carlos Ribeiro finished him back in the day. He was submitted by Glaco Franco. I mean, this is a fighter. Even his, you want to go back even further against Claudio Marcelino. I mean, this is a fighter that doesn't just lose; he gets finished when he loses. And I'll be quite honest, I'm not too high on Nikolas Motta. He has a smaller frame for the division. I could easily see this being the last time that we see him in the octagon. Takes an L here against Tom Nolan. Tom Nolan is very, very rangy for the division. He is a well-rounded fighter. He has shown that his striking is nasty. It's dangerous. And I'm kind of leaning towards Tom Nolan landing some impactful shots and stopping this fight. I think that he gets the finish over Nikolas Motta. We're going to see him celebrating inside the cage. That's what I'm seeing here. You do note that Tom Nolan is just 6-0. Not a lot of professional experience, but also understand that he has a good amount of amateur experience. All right, so he's a fighter he has a little bit more experience than some of you guys may realize. And he's a very game fighter. He's extremely confident, and I think that he's well-rounded. And I think that Nikolas Motta is going to be in some trouble here. If you want to play devil's advocate, Tom Nolan, just 23 years old. You do understand when you have these young fighters learning on the job, at times they can make some mistakes. But just from what I've been seeing from Nikolas Motta, I think that he's not even the same fighter that he was just a couple fights ago. I think that some of these knockout losses that he's taken throughout the years have started to catch up with him. Maybe he's a fighter that has a little bit too much mileage on him. So even though he's 30 years old, I think maybe he has more of a 34, 35-year-old I don't know, say mindset, just, a 34-year-old's wear and tear, maybe I would say. And for the lightweight division, he's somewhat of a weathered fighter. I just don't trust him. I think Tom Nolan gets the finish here. That's what I'm seeing. Tom Nolan will have almost a 6-inch reach advantage. He's much taller. He's much more rangy. And I think that if he fights an intelligent fight from the outside, Tom Nolan could really set some things up here. All right, so let's go take a look at the betting line. Tom Nolan is a big-time favorite. He's a minus 300 on my bookie, but we see him even as high as minus 330, 340 on some of these other books. Opened as a minus 210, so big-time action coming in on Tom Nolan here. And I understand it, and I'm in agreement with it. Not only do I not have an issue with the high line, even up to minus 300, 320. That's how confident I feel. If you want to slip that into a parlay or something, I wouldn't advise against it. I also think that Tom Nolan gets that finish, and I'm leaning towards the TKO knockout finish there, not necessarily a sub. So that might be a prop that you want to target, see what line you can get on that. And Tom Nolan, I think that he will prove to be a UFC caliber fighter for some time to come. He seems promising. Another fighter coming off this recent season of Dana White's Contender Series here, and Gene Silva looked quite good in this fight. He was an underdog and really showed up. He's just 27 years old. He takes on Westin Wilson in his UFC debut. Now, Westin Wilson, 34 years old, training over at Upstate Karate over there with Stephen Thompson. This is a fighter that has supposedly somewhat of a striking background, but really has been getting the job done with his submission skills. This is a fighter that has 16 wins, 10 via submission. Haven't been overwhelmed with the level of competition. We saw how he looked in his UFC debut, where I understand that he was taking on a very tough fighter in Joanderson Brito, but Brito just went in there and just treated him like he was a dog toy, and Brito was a pit bull. Like, he was literally just playing with them out there, finished them up, brutalized them. And, the issue I see here is Gene Silva. He does some things that resemble Brito to me. This is a fighter that is very comfortable on the feet, has some big-time power, and I think that Gene Silva is going to get the knockout finish here. I think he's going to finish him on the feet. That's the route that I'm going. I know he didn't get that finish in that last fight against Kevin Vallejos, but Kevin is a respected up-and-coming fighter. This is a talented kid in Kevin, and he went out there and did enough. So training over there, Gene training over with the Fighting Nerds. You guys know that they've been putting in some great work as of recently. They're coming in very prepared, and I think that he's going to get an opportunity to finish this fight. Westin Wilson, unfortunately was diagnosed with giraffe syndrome some time ago. Actually, it's been a long time since he's been diagnosed with that, so it's something that he's had to deal with, and I just see Gene Silva taking advantage of the giraffe syndrome. And Westin Wilson, this will be the last time I think that we see Westin Wilson in the octagon. And luckily enough for him, a tough fighter that has some good amount of pro experience. He's been cutting his teeth over on the regional scene for years. Got knocked out against Teruto Ishihara, if you guys remember him, the Team Alpha Male prospect, or not prospect, but one-time prospect. He's been around. Not a lot of recognizable names on the resume here, but you got to give him respect, like I said, for just putting in that work for some time. And shout out to him for being able to step inside the octagon 2 times, even though he's going to have taken 2 losses. I do respect all these fighters, and I'm on a serious note, props to him for being able to just reach the octagon. You take a look at the betting line, and we're looking at a huge favorite here in Gene Silva, who is as high as a minus 900 on my bookie, creeping up on that minus 1,000 status. I mean, a 10-1 favorite on a fighter that's making his UFC debut. He's just 27 years old, doesn't even have an overwhelming amount of pro experience. He's a fighter that's taken 2 losses. In Gene Silva, he's a fighter that's taken 2 losses in just 13 pro fights. It's not like an immaculate record, but he looked good in that last fight, and I think it also says what everyone's feeling about Westin Wilson. That they feel that this is a guy that just shouldn't be in the octagon. He hasn't really proven anything at this point to be going in there and getting a victory over Gene Silva. So yeah, Gene Silva is definitely my pick to win the fight. I think he gets that knockout. You can't really do anything with the money line on this fight. See what you can get on maybe a first round knockout or something like that, if it's even reasonable. And I don't even know if it is reasonable at this point. So this is a fight that you're just running to grab a drink real quick. You're coming back and you're watching them scrape up the carcass of Westin Wilson. One of the better fights on this card, even though it's taking place pretty early, in the event. Farid Basharat taking on Taylor Lapilus. Farid Basharat, one of the Basharat brothers, of course, just 26 years old. His brother Javid. Both these fighters are so promising. I've referred to them as some of the more well-rounded fighters that we see in the game right now. When you think about how polished their striking is, how polished their grappling is, they do it all very well. Their jiu-jitsu, their wrestling, the boxing's very crisp, very sharp. Maybe one thing you could say is that we haven't seen an extreme amount of power from them, but I don't have a problem with that. When I'm banking on a fighter to get the job done, if he can go out there and really just out-volume his opponent and just have good defensive skills in the feet, I admire that just as much as a guy that goes out there and looks to starch his opponent. So Farid, extremely well-rounded, both the Basharat brothers. I would say that they're two fighters in the game that if you were an up-and-coming fighter, you almost want to model their skill sets and what they're doing right now. I'm very high on it. Farid and Taylor Lapilus, this is a fighter. He had an initial stint in the UFC some time ago, where he took a loss to Eric Perez. He had a couple of victories as well, not against anyone that's recognizable. Rocky Lee, Oka Sasaki, if you remember him, the very tall and rangy Japanese fighter who was at one point in time kind of thought of to be a pretty good prospect, but really never turned out to be that. Took that loss against Perez and then actually had a victory over Leandro Issa, and then he left the UFC on a winning note, which was kind of interesting. Eric Perez did the same thing. Eric Perez actually was a pretty decent fighter, if you guys remember Eric Perez. So he lost a unanimous decision to him. Perez, like I said, a decent fighter. And then from there, he went out and has been putting in some work before making a return, right? Had some victories over in Aries, had a victory over Wilson Hayes, a very good fighter, even though he was up in age at that time, but a good fighter in Bellator for years. Had a victory over Nate Maness. You guys are familiar with Nate Maness. Josh Hill, a very talented fighter, been putting in work over in Bellator. So he's been fighting guys with some respectable names outside the UFC. He's been getting the job done. He's a talented fighter. He has good striking, does Taylor Lapilus. He went out there and basically styled on the UFC newcomer, Cowlin Loughran. If you remember that, the undefeated Irish fighter who was 8-0, I believe, at the time. Taylor really just did what he needed to do in that fight. Now, if you want to note one thing in that fight, though, Taylor was taken down. I believe he was taken down twice in that fight. That worries me a little bit for him here, because if Farid can get this fight down to the mat, which he's pretty good at doing, he has some sharp jiu-jitsu skills, and I could see him kind of snagging rounds like that. Now, on the feet, this is where I think this fight could be very interesting. Like I said, Taylor Lapilus is a fighter that, he's very quick, he's very agile, and he can go out there and style on a lot of fighters, I believe, in this division on the feet. And Farid is a fighter that does that very well as well. So I'm interested to see who gets the better of the striking exchanges. And I think that Farid will edge him with the striking. I could see him working in that calf kick. Him and his brother love to work the calf kicks in with the quick hands. And I still will lean Farid to get the better of the striking exchanges. But more importantly, I think that Farid is the more complete fighter, as I kind of kicked off this fight, talking about that. I think he's the more complete fighter that will be able to mix things up a little bit more so than a Taylor Lapilus. But Taylor Lapilus is a good fighter. I think that he's a fighter that not a lot of people really know about. He's kind of been under the radar, and he will have a 2-inch reach advantage, even though he's 2 inches taller. But I like Farid Basharat to get the job done here. I'm going to say he wins a decision. Taylor has proven to be very durable throughout the years, never been finished. And, we take a look at the betting line here. Farid Basharat opened up on Jazz Sports as a -174. He's now a -300. He's a 3-1 favorite. I feel that line is pretty high. Excuse me here. With that long layoff from doing these videos, man, my voice ain't holding up. We're just kicking things off here. Maybe I'm talking a little bit too much. But I do believe that the -300 line on Farid is a little bit too high for my liking. I would have wanted Farid, or if you get that opportunity still, I'd want him like 240 at 230 and under. And obviously, if you're grabbing it where it opened up around that -175 range, you did much better. But I do believe at that point in time, the value will be on Taylor Lapilus. If you're grabbing Taylor Lapilus at +230, even I've seen him as high as +250 on some of these books, I think that the value is on him there. So if you're looking for a value play, if you're getting Taylor at a decent line up in the 200s, 220, 230 up that way, I think the value is on him. I think that he can potentially take a closely fought battle here All right, if he could stuff the takedowns and they go tit for tat on the feet, he can edge out a decision. And you also note Taylor Lapilus hasn't been much of a finisher as well. That's why I do feel I feel confident this fight will go towards the later rounds. Okay, if you're looking for the over in this fight, or if you're looking to target a specific victory, I think it's more a decision type of fight. Taylor, which is 4 knockout victories throughout 19 victories, and not stringing off any type of subs and whatnot. So, and he's been durable as well. So it might not be easy for Farid to get that finish. But give me Farid Basharat to take a decision here, mixing things up. In the bantamweight division, we got Marcus McGhee taking on Gaston Bolaños. This is a fun fight. Marcus McGhee has shown to have some real power on the feet. He goes out there and looks to starch his opponents. He's coming off a knockout victory over JP Bays. He also hurt Journey Newsom in that fight before eventually setting up that submission. So he's been finishing fights left and right even before making that UFC debut. Now his opponent Gaston Bolaños just had a big victory in his UFC debut against Aaron Phillips. Anytime you're making a UFC debut and you get the job done, obviously it's a huge victory for your career. Now Gaston has had a lot of experience over in Bellator, so he's been fighting on a respectable stage, of course. He's a fighter that has professional Muay Thai experience, professional kickboxing bouts. He's a striker first and foremost, all right? There's no question about that. He's a dangerous striker, and that's why I believe this fight can play out very, very exciting. You got two guys that really can look to take each other's heads off on the feet, where McGhee is a little bit more straight to the point with his boxing skills and whatnot, trying to set up the power. Gaston Bolaños, you're going to see some spinning attacks. You're going to see some tricky type of strikes. Maybe he could land the mark. But the difference I see in these two fighters is Marcus McGhee is a more complete mixed martial artist. He's been sharpening his skill set over at the MMA lab for some time now. There's some fights that I could point to where I've seen him fight an intelligent fight where he was fighting a respectable striker and he's went in there and closed the distance and really worked his takedowns and whatnot. So that's the difference in this fight for me. I think that Marcus McGhee is the more complete mixed martial artist. Now, while he's trying to close the distance or he's trying to set up his own attack, he's gonna have to face some danger from Gaston Bolaños. There's no question about that. So do not be shocked if Gaston Bolaños lands a big shot in this fight and gets a finish, because he has that type of ability. Even though we haven't seen Marcus McGhee getting knocked out by anybody, all right, when you have the type of when you have limbs like Gaston Bolaños getting thrown around the way that he throws them around, break the tape down on him, you understand that there could be a knockout. Period. Now, I don't think it's as likely as Marcus McGhee fighting an intelligent fight, closing the distance, letting the fight play out to the later rounds, maybe just getting that sweat going, getting the muscles kind of worked up so that pop isn't there as much later on. And I think that we lean Marcus McGhee to get the job done here. Now let's go take a look at the betting line though and see what we're talking about, because Marcus McGhee is a big favorite. He's creeping up, he opened up as a -321 and he's right around that -300 range on multiple sportsbook. On Jazz Sports, he's a -277. He's a big time favorite. It's a big favorite there, and I'm not necessarily crazy about that line. I would say there's more value on Gaston Bolaños. You have to understand that he is a fighter with that striking background, so he's learning the entire sport of MMA a little bit later in his career. He's 31 years old, right? He had a little bit of a later start refining his overall game, but you're going to see that start to catch up. And he's 31 years old. He's in his physical prime. As he starts to get that takedown defense going better, as he knows how to keep that distance, that's where he could use his kickboxing skills. And as of recently, over the last couple of years, even more than ever in the sport, we've seen these kickboxers have a lot of success in the sport. The way the sport has gone, all right, with the overall sport, with just tricks and trades they're learning in the gym to create that distance and nullify the wrestlers. And it's not even like Marcus McGhee. I wouldn't say he's some type of crazy wrestler, but he is a very well-rounded mixed martial artist. Now, also take note, Marcus McGhee has that power though also, so that's another X factor. Well, Gaston's trying to set something up. He could possibly be clipped with his own stuff there. Great fight. Give me Marcus McGhee I think that Marcus McGhee could potentially pull off a submission here. I could potentially see a submission. I'll lean towards that route, maybe inflicting some damage, getting control down in the mountain, and getting some type of sub, something similar to what we saw in the Journey Newsom fight, potentially. In the welterweight division, Preston Parsons now takes on Matheus Semelsberger. He was initially supposed to be fighting Basil Hafez. Hafez pulls out. And I'll say this, I wouldn't look too much into the new opponent as far as stylistically. I think that even though Basil Hafez is a fighter that has a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt and has used his grappling a lot in his fights, he also has showcased that he can strike, right? We saw that in his UFC debut where he really fought a good fight against Jack Della Maddalena. Preston Parsons is a fighter. His strong suit is his grappling, and I think that he knows he needs to continue to sharpen his striking regardless if he's going to survive in the UFC. So I'm sure he was training all aspects of his game. And I just say that in regards to the fact that Matheus Semelsberger is a dangerous striker. He's a dangerous striker for sure. But back to Preston Parsons, he's coming off a loss against Trevin Giles in a fight where he had some ups and downs throughout that fight, eventually dropping 2 of the 3 rounds. Before that, had a victory over Evan Elder. I do believe Evan Elder is a good fighter, so that's a solid victory there. Now, his UFC debut was not a good look for him, where he got knocked out by Daniel Rodriguez in the first round. And we'll see if Preston Parsons can right the ship. He's only 28 years old. He has a pretty good frame for the division. He has some grappling skills. I think there's some potential there. And over to Matheus Semelsberger. This is a fighter. He's 31 years old. He's creeping into the prime of his career. He has really shown some promise at times. Coming off a very tough loss, though, he was up on the scorecards. If he was able to survive that 3rd round, I believe he still would have won that fight. But he ended up getting finished by Uros Medic. And Uros Medic has proven to be a dangerous fighter. And Matheus Semelsberger, he's the type of guy that's willing to slug it out. And, at times that's going to catch up with you in the cage. And that's what happened there. But make no mistake, Semelsberger is a well-rounded fighter that has some solid skills on the feet. I think that he gets the better of Preston Parsons at range on the feet. I don't believe that Preston Parsons is nearly the threat that Uros Medic is in the striking department. So that threat of Semelsberger getting a little reckless, trying to get the finish and getting clipped with something or something like that is much more unrealistic, in my opinion. If Preston Parsons is going to get the job done here, he's going to really have to have some success with his grappling and his wrestling. Maybe he'll have a little bit of a cardio edge if Semelsberger wasn't training full time leading up to this fight, as he's taking it on short notice. Maybe there's that type of possibility. But, Matheus Semelsberger, just note, I think he had a split decision loss against Jeremiah Wells in a very closely contested match. Jeremiah Wells is a beast. He went out there and really styled on Jake Matthews. You take a look at his losses, and they're all very closely contested matches. The K.S. Williams fight, the Alex Morono fight. All right, so, this is a guy that every time he stepped into the octagon, he has shown that he is game. And you take a look at some of the W's as well. Knocked out Martin Sano. That was a fighter that should have never been in there with him. The Diaz brothers got him in the octagon there just so he could check that box off. Knocked out Jason Witt, a wrestling-based fighter. Maybe we see something similar to what we saw in the Jason Witt fight here. Preston Parsons with that grappling background. Matheus Semelsberger should be the more polished striker. Like I said, he'll have a 3-inch reach advantage. He's 3 inches taller. He's the more rangy fighter. Like I said, I like Preston Parsons. He's still young enough where I think we could see some improvement from him and potentially see him, be able to hang around in the UFC. But the more I break down tape on this fight, I don't really care that Semelsberger's taking this fight on short notice. I just think that if he shows up, he is the superior fighter. There's one other thing I do need to note. Matheus Semelsberger is coming off a fight where he took some serious damage, okay? And that fight took place, we'll just pull that up real quick. That knockout loss that he took against Medic was not that long ago, all right? Just, a couple months ago. So you do have to note that it was going into August. So August, September, October, November, December, 4 or 5 months ago or whatnot. But he took some serious damage there. We'll see how he rebounds. He's the superior fighter. I'm still going to side with Semelsberger here. He opened up as a -135 on my bookie, went to a -140, and then dipped back the other way to a -130. A little bit of up and down, but not a lot of movement going on. I like Matheus Semelsberger. Even with this line, I think the line is it's very close. And I think, like I said, Semelsberger is the superior fighter. I would like to see him fight a more intelligent fight here, a little bit more of a patient fight. This way the pace is slowed down and there's no risk for him if he's not in full conditioning, in full condition there. So, but give me Semelsberger. I think Semelsberger, I think I'm leaning decision, but we have seen Parsons knocked out twice and submitted. Out of his 4 losses, he's been finished 3 times. I'm going to swap that up. I'm going to say Semelsberger can get a finish here. I'm going to say there's a possible TKO going on here. Semelsberger comes in with the fire under him after being finished, and he's just a very aggressive fighter. We've seen Parsons slept by D-Rod the way he was. Give me Semelsberger by KO TKO. We got the legend Andrei Arlovski taking on Waldo Cortes-Acosta. Andrei Arlovski, now 44 years old. This could potentially be the last time we see him in the cage. Just note that. I have a great deal of respect for Andrei Arlovski. Got to tip the hat to him real quick. This is a guy still battling in his mid-40s. He's been around from the very beginning. When I think of the early days of me being gravitated towards the UFC and mixed martial arts, I think of Andrei Arlovski, the UFC heavyweight champion of the world, had the fangs on his mouthpiece. I could picture the commercial or some type of commercial I'm seeing, whether it was on the computer or on TV, probably on TV back in the day, and probably was some type of commercial for a pay-per-view event, and seeing him with the fangs on his mouthpiece and just being like, damn, look at this guy, or watching reruns back in the day on Spike TV where they would show his early fights, and to see a heavyweight fighter in the condition and the shape he was in with the boxing skills. I remember him, was it Paul Buentello? I believe it was Paul Buentello, kind of a pudgy boxer. I remember Andrei Arlovski, just the contrast of his physical shape compared to Paul Buentello and the hurt that he put on him. He just stood out to me from back in those days. Also, I've mentioned this before, but it's just worth mentioning it again. It was quite funny bumping into Andrei Arlovski at a Home Depot waiting to grab paint as he's there with his wife in South Florida, in the Coconut Creek area. And his wife was an absolute model. So, and when you see a guy like Andrei Arlovski in person, it's different than when you see him in the cage. Man. When you're bumping into this guy in Home Depot, you feel like this guy is meant to be in the battlefield, man. He's a big dude. All right, so how do I see this fight playing out, though? Waldo Cortes-Acosta has some good boxing skills, and that could be a problem here because Andrei Arlovski's chin has taken a lot of damage throughout the years, and I could see Waldo potentially getting the finish with his hands. Now, if you want to play devil's advocate, we've seen Waldo eat a lot of leg kicks. He's very heavy on that front foot. We saw Marcos Rogerio de Lima absolutely eat his legs apart. Chase Sherman had a lot of success against him as well there, even though Waldo did sneak off the victory. If Andrei fights an intelligent fight, all right, I'm playing devil's advocate here. If he fights a very intelligent fight and if he can avoid that big shot, there is a much more realistic possibility that Arlovski can sneak in a decision victory here than some of you guys are willing to admit, especially as you take a look at the betting line. Acosta is now a minus 650. He's been a minus 700 at times on my bookie over the past couple days. Don't get me wrong. I think that Waldo Cortes-Acosta is going to get the finish here. I think he's going to get a knockout victory with his hands. It's going to be hard for Andrei to avoid that for 15 minutes. But if this goes to a decision, we've seen Andrei Arlovski do this before. And I mean as of recently, even up there in age, right? We've seen him stifle guys like Jay Collier, Jared Vandera, Carlos Felipe, Chase Sherman, Tanner Bozier. I would say that Tanner Bozier was one of the more impressive ones as of recently because Tanner, he's shown up at times. The Felipe Lins one looks pretty good as well. All right, Felipe has some good striking skills. He was able to stifle him there. Did it to Ben Rothwell. So just understand that. But time is not on his side. He's just getting older and older. And I just find it hard to picture him avoiding eating a big shot where he's hurt in this fight. And Waldo has some good boxing skills, has the boxing background. And he's a fighter that's getting more comfortable as a mixed martial artist, right? Because he got to the sport a little bit later. He's going to look better and better as of recently. 32 years old in the prime of his physicality. Give me Waldo Cortes-Acosta to get that TKO finish. But I don't say it as confidently as some of you other guys are saying it out there. I've seen everyone just feeling that this is a lock to be that type of fight. I don't see that. I think that there's a slight possibility Arlovski can sneak in a decision here. He's as game as it comes. This guy lives in the gym over at American Top Team in Coconut Creek, surrounds himself with the best in the world, takes care of himself. But Give me Waldo Cortes-Acosta to get that finish. In the middleweight division, I would say this is the most exciting fight set to take place in this card. Phil Hawes taking on Brunno Ferreira. Both these guys have big-time knockout power in their hands. They bring the fight. We've seen these guys go out on their shield. Definitely more so in the case of Phil Hawes. Phil Hawes has been a fighter that has really struggled with his chin. But Brunno is a fighter that is coming off his first ever loss as a pro, where he took a big-time knockout loss against a fighter that was making his UFC debut, and Nursultan Rozibiov, a little bit of a tough name for me there, but you guys know I'm talking about, the Uzbeki fighter who really has a lot of experience and is going to instantly be a threat to the division, as he only has one fight in the octagon. But he knocked Brunno out, so you have to understand that Brunno's chin has taken some damage as of recently. That fight took place about 6 months ago or whatnot. Phil Hawes, this is a guy, he's such an offensive threat, but like I said, his chin has just been so diminished throughout the years, and I think it really all started with that loss that he took to Julian Marquez on Dana White's Contender Series. I think that was the first season, I believe, a long time ago in 2017, and that was a fight where he was out on his feet and just took a lot of damage and was eventually just basically flatlined against the cage, and strung off some victories after that and really got the ship rolling again. But we saw him knocked out against Chris Curtis. We saw him knocked out against Roman Dolidze. We saw him just again knocked out against Ikram Aliskirov. And he had some moments in all those fights. But the thing is, can you trust him, throughout the fight? Because it only takes one shot to finish him up there. And when you have a fighter and the Hulk here who doesn't just have that power, but I think that he has underrated accuracy. People don't realize it's not just about the power, man. It's about landing the mark. And that's all this fighter has done so far early in his career. I mean, he's been landing the mark, just starching these dudes. Knocked out Gregory Rodriguez in his UFC debut. On Dana White's Contender Series, had that nasty knockout over Leon Elu early in that fight. And these knockouts are coming nice and early. We still need to see a lot more from him as far as his overall skill set. And Phil Hawes is a fighter, right? He's a former D1 wrestler. Obviously, he may be the better mixed martial artist and might have more tools, but I would say his chin matched up with the Hulk's power and the accuracy there, that outweighs any other type of thing you want to focus on in this fight. I'm more worried about Phil Hawes being knocked out in this fight and hurt in a bad way within the 15 minutes more than anything else. That's why I'm leaning Brunno's way. I'm taking the Hulk here to get that knockout victory. I just can't trust Phil Hawes' chin. All right. This is a fighter, even when you take a look, if you remember back to some of his recent wins, there was opportunities for him to be hurt in some of those fights. The Duran Win fight, Win was so undersized, and yes, Phil Hawes was butchering him with those step-in elbows. But when you break down tape in that fight, you can't help but note that if he was trying that on a lot of other guys in this division, you would see some type of wraparound hook clipping him right over the ear and putting him on Wobble Street. And listen, don't act like you guys don't know what Wobble Street is. I'm sure a lot of you listening to this have been on Wobble Street before. Getting a little lippy at the bar, getting a little fresh with the neighbor down the street, and you've been clipped behind the ear and you've been wobbling around too. So we've all been there, right? We've all been on Wobble Street. Even the teller has been on Wobble Street. My brother put me on Wobble Street plenty of times throughout the years. All right, so but you guys know what I'm saying, man. Even when he was fighting Duran Win, he was having so much success and landing all these types of nasty strikes, but you understand what the situation was against the undersized little wrestler there. Brunno is going to be dangerous here. I could see him slipping in a shot and knocking out Phil Hawes. That's the route I'm going. I say the Hulk gets a big-time knockout and gets back in the winner's circle, and I'm excited for that fight there. Phil Hawes has the potential to land the mark as well and knock out Brunno, who was just recently knocked out. But give me the Hulk. This is a very close line. Brunno opened up as a dog. He was a plus 115. We see action coming in on him. He's now a minus 125 in my bookie. This is a very close betting line, essentially almost a pick'em type of fight, but I like the Brazilian here. He's very accurate. I think he lands the shot. I'm really digging this matchup here in the bantamweight division. Ricky Simón takes on Mario Bautista. Ricky Simón, the number 13th ranked bantamweight fighter, he's in an interesting spot right now. In his last fight He had a huge opportunity that he came up very short in against Yadong Song. The winner of that fight was going to be pushing for an eventual shot at the title, right? They were much closer. Instead, he takes that loss, and now he's all the way at the 13th spot. And, he's taking an unranked killer in Mario Bautista. I'm very high on the skill set of Mario Bautista. He's very well-rounded, and he hasn't necessarily had the chance to prove how good he is up until this point, or at this point. Coming off a big victory against Damon Blackshear, that's a respectable victory. Blackshear has proven that he's a dangerous opponent. But before that, just getting matched up with a lot of lower level opponents. But he's going out there and doing what he should do, finishing these fighters very early in these fights. Finishing Guido Canetti, Benito Lopez, and Brian Kelleturd all in the first round. Had a dominant victory over Jay Perrin. I would have liked to have seen him got the finish there, but Perrin, he's whatever. He's a tough dude. Even though he was finished by the kid very quickly. Now, he was knocked out against Trevin Jones back in 2021. Trevin Jones has some big-time power. Made a mistake, got clipped there. Respectable victory over Miles Johns. Also submitted by Corey Sandhagen, potentially the best bantamweight in the world. So the reason why I go over his resume there, it's just a little interesting to me. The book is not out on him, to say the least. We're really going to get to see what kind of fighter Mario Bautista is over the next year, over this upcoming year. And if you really want to even go there, we're going to find out this upcoming Saturday when he gets matched up against a killer like Ricky Simón that's going to be shooting relentless takedowns on him, and a guy that's just proven to be a warrior. We're going to see what Bautista is about. Now, Bautista's been being groomed over there at the MMA lab for some time. He's one of the more promising fighters coming out of there, and I think his time is now. Now, I'm not saying he's necessarily going to be a future champion, but I think he is a fighter that can stir things up, and I think he could be a top 15 fighter. I think he could break into the top 15. So I'm very excited for this matchup. So as I said, Ricky Simón is going to look to use his wrestling. There's just no question about that. You take a look at what they've been doing in the cage throughout their careers. So Mario Bautista, landing 5.32 strikes per minute compared to Ricky Simón's 3.01. I definitely lean for the striking edge to be towards Bautista's way. He's a little bit more rangy. I think he's a little bit more of a polished striker, whereas Ricky Simón tries to overwhelm you with his wrestling and swings these power hooks in, right? He has that I don't know, I wouldn't even call it a peekaboo style, but you guys know what I'm talking about. He has the hands up high, he's stepping side to side and he's throwing these hooks, but really looking to close the distance and get in on your hips. And that's exactly what I expect him to do here. I don't think he wants to strike it out with Bautista for 3 rounds. He wants to get in and get those takedowns. Believe it or not, his takedown accuracy is only at 50%, but that's just because he's shooting relentless takedowns. And when you throw so many takedowns out there, and eventually you get that one, doesn't matter if you got stuffed on those first 2, right? If he gets that one and then he's on top of you for 2-3 minutes, he's snagging that round up. And obviously he's also dangerous to potentially submit you down there and work a finish as well. So, like I said, this is a fight I'm very excited about. I'm very interested to see how it plays out. I've been a little bit back and forth on where I'm going with my pick here, but I am settling in on the Mario Bautista pick. I think that if he can keep that range and if he can keep this fight standing for long enough, I think he'll prove to be the better striker. We saw Ricky Simón really look, he just, I don't want to say he looked atrocious out there against Yadong Song. I mean, he almost did. He just looked like he was confused. And I don't know where his confidence is at on the feet. I could see Bautista really taking advantage of the situation if he can keep it there. And I'm just, we'll get to the betting line as well, but I'm just not ready to pick Ricky Simón after what he just did in that last fight against Yadong Song. Just the way he showed up, it was not impressive to say the least. He opened as a -150. He's now a -180. So a lot of you guys are in disagreement with me here. A lot of people are esteeming the Ricky Simón money line, and I'm not seeing that. I'm actually saying Bautista shows up here and he gets the job done. All right, I'm going to say it's not going to be easy. He's going to have to stuff a lot of takedowns, but I can see him inflicting some damage. We've seen him mix in the knees very well, landing flying knees. He's a dangerous fighter. He mixed in a lot of different types of attacks. And Ricky Simón, well, he'll try to dominate with the wrestling and that relentless pressure. I could see Bautista landing some more impactful type shots that steal rounds. The judges like to see damage done, and We could also see Bautista get a finish here. Let's note that Ricky Simón has been finished, right? Out of his 4 losses, he's been knocked out twice and submitted once. 3 of his 4 losses have come by way of finish. Remember when Uriah Faber hit him with that overhand loopy type hook? I mean, he's made some mistakes in the feet as well. And Mario Bautista is a little bit of a sniper. He's a fight finisher, I would say. Out of his 13 victories, 9 of them coming by way of finish. All right, more than half of them coming by way of finish. And I will lean Mario Bautista's way. Wouldn't be shocked if he gets a finish either. All right, so the value, in my opinion, without a doubt, is on Mario Bautista. If you're grabbing him at plus 150, plus 146, and I've been a little bit back and forth. And I wouldn't be shocked if Ricky Simón can string off the takedowns and dominate with the wrestling, or take control of the fight with the wrestling. I wouldn't be shocked. But per the betting line and per what I'm seeing from Mario Bautista, he looks like he's ready to go. This is the biggest opportunity of his career. Give me Mario Bautista to get the job done. This one was nicely done by the UFC in the lightweight division. Jim Miller matched up with Gabriel Benítez. This fight will be a treat for the fans. Jim Miller has been stringing off a lot of victories throughout the last couple of years, but we just have to understand he's still 40 years old. And that's why I like this matchup. The UFC's not matching him up with some absolute stud killer. Now, don't get me wrong. Gabriel Benítez has some power, and he will knock you out if you're slipping defensively. But he's a fighter that, he's just a game dude, if you know what I'm saying, right? He's coming off that knockout victory over Charlie Ontiveros, a fighter that should have never been fighting in the UFC at all. Before that, he was knocked out 2 times in a row by David Onama and Billy Q. Knocked out Justin James, a fighter that has since been cut by the UFC. A victory loss over Omar Morales, and then he was knocked out by Sadiq Yusuf before that, right? So a lot of L's going on. Also note, though, he did have success before he was knocked out against Sadiq. He almost had to knock out himself before being clipped by Sadiq, who was a very talented fighter. So that fight kind of sums up who he is. I expect him to bring the fight. Jim Miller, we talked about the recent success, just knocked out Jesse Butler, a fighter that probably shouldn't be fighting in the UFC. I don't know. The book's not out on him, but that was nasty. Making his UFC debut, getting starched by a Hall of Famer the way he did. That was a nasty knockout. The decision loss against Alexander Hernandez, that was a very closely contested match. Before that, submitted Cerrone, knocked out Nikolas Motta. Talked about him earlier. Knocked out Eric Gonzalez. Losses to Joe Selecki, Vince Pichel. The Pichel fight was very close as well. When you take a look at some of his recent losses, they were all very closely contested matches as well. So he's been doing his thing, man. I don't know what it is with Jim Miller. Maybe he's been bit by so many ticks. Something's going on with him, and he doesn't age or something, because Jim Miller was just always the perennial top 5, top 10 lightweight fighter back in the day. When you thought of the lightweight division and you thought about a fighter that was just game and very well-rounded, Jim Miller was that guy. And it's crazy to think that he's still hanging around doing what he was doing so long ago. So this is a fight. Like I said, I think these guys are going to clash here. And Jim Miller just seems to be able to find the mark just as much now as he ever has been. All right, so the crafty southpaw. I think that, and this is a southpaw versus southpaw matchup. Gabriel Benítez will be dangerous to land that big shot himself, but I think Miller is going to find the mark here. I'm taking Jim Miller. How do I pick against Jim Miller right now in a matchup like this? He's a legend. We know he's a longtime Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. He's crafty there. Very high-level fighter IQ. And Mugli, Gabriel Benítez will look to land that big shot, but all in all, I got to go with Jim Miller here. He has that fight experience, that fighter IQ. This fight is essentially a pick'em. Jim Miller opened as a dog, plus 130. Opened as a plus 110, hit 130 on my bookie. He's now at minus 120. It's a pick'em fight. Give me the legend. Give me the future Hall of Famer, Jim Miller. He just keeps showing up and taking out these C-level fighters, right? These C- type level fighters. The UFC throws him in there with these types of guys, and he delivers. So just note that Gabriel Benítez is a little bit more dangerous than some of these other guys. He does have that fight-ending power as well. So can he land a shot? I'll say Jim Miller will be slick enough to avoid that. Give me Jim Miller. Maybe a knockout, maybe a TKO. He's been doing that. But if it goes to the judges' scorecards as well, I feel better picking the Jim Miller pick there. Now, this is an interesting fight here. You got Matheus Nicolau taking on Manil Kape, a fighter that he just defeated a couple years ago. But Matheus is coming in as a pretty heavy underdog. And I'll kind of explain why that is the case here. I remember their first fight very vividly, even before diving back into the tape. I had some action on Nicolau in that fight, and it was a fight that played out very closely. Nicolau won a split decision. At the time, Manil was a very different fighter, first and foremost, right? He was coming over from Ryzen, coming over from the Japanese fighting scene, bursting into the UFC. A lot of people were high on him. He came up short a couple times in those first fights in the octagon. He was very hesitant. For whatever reason, he was much more of a hesitant fighter when he first started getting those initial fights. And now he has settled into the UFC. I mean, you saw it in his last fight against Felipe dos Santos. The amount of volume that he puts out is crazy these days. I love his defensive skills. The head movement is crazy. I mean, he's like a video game character, fighting in real life in front of us. But, you date back to those first two losses he took. And, I've said throughout the years, Pantoja and Nicolau have reminded me a lot of each other. Both have very good grappling skills, but their striking is underrated. And both of those fights, I believe both those fights were split decision losses for Kopp. And in both of those fights, he was a little hesitant and, not putting out as much volume as he should have. And it cost him some decision losses there. So the difference is, since that last loss to Nicolau, he's really settled in. He's going out there getting knockouts over Ode Osborne, Zhalgas Imagulov, victory over David Dvorak. And then in that last fight against Felipe dos Santos, just the movement that we saw from him. I mean, there's no question that he's the real deal, right? Now, on the other hand, when we talk about why the line is the way it is, Matheus is coming off a very tough knockout loss against Brandon Royval, right? So he just was finished in a devastating way in his last fight. You got to worry a little bit when you're facing off against a guy in Kopp who is very dangerous and very, very quick with his striking. Before that, he was on a 6-fight winning streak before that Royval loss, and had some good victories over Tim Elliott, David Dvorak, Matt Schnell, Kopp, like we talked about. And the difference this time around, in my opinion, is that Kopp is just going to have more volume in this fight. He's going to be looking for that fight finish, which he might find, but he's not going to take his foot off the gas. I think that he's really going to press this fight. So even if he doesn't get that finish, I could see him snagging up those rounds for a decision that as he didn't do that the first time around, I see that being the case this time around. Manil is very well-rounded, good grappling skills, great speed, like I said. I think you guys know which way I'm going here. I could see Kopp potentially getting that finish. But even if it goes to the judges' scorecards, I favor him. Now, I will say this, though. Let's go slide over to the betting odds. He opened as a minus 210 on my bookie. He's now almost a minus 300. He's a minus 270. I think that line is a little high, right? It's a little bit over. The line was a little overvalued, and I'm not too crazy about where it's going, in my opinion, because Nicolau, he's being undervalued here. People are kind of forgetting that he's a very well-rounded fighter. He has nasty grappling skills. He can strike as well. And there's potential for this fight to play out closely. Even just think about Manil's last fight, right? I mean, he looked great in it, like I said, but that fight actually played out pretty closely, right? And people were raving about what that newcomer did, that young up and coming fighter in Felipe dos Santos, who's training at a team shoot box, and just another young star coming out of that camp. And he did look very good, but you also have to, kind of understand that Kopp let that fight play out like that, right? He did eat some damage at times, and it was a fight that played out close, a lot closer than some people thought that it should have. Kopp was a huge favorite, fighting a UFC newcomer that's extremely young. And now you have Nicolau. If he's able to avoid getting knocked out, he is a fighter that is a proven top 5, top 10, I would say, flyweight fighter. This is a top of the line fighter, and this fight could play out closer than some of you guys think. So if you're targeting that very high line, you might get bit in the ass, in my opinion. You had to grab that line earlier for it to be worth it, in my opinion. So I think this fight could play out closely, but I like Kopp, and I wouldn't be surprised if Kopp gets a knockout victory here. And I'm loving the energy that Manil's bringing to the cage these days. You guys, you gotta love the post-fight speech that he had in the octagon. All the energy that he brought into the cage in that huge night, where that huge event where Strickland defeated Adesanya. So, give me Manil Kopp to land a knockout TKO, get the job done. Here we go. We got the rematch. Magomed Ankalaev taking on Johnny Walker. Got this matched up once again. Magomed Ankalaev was looking pretty good in the beginning parts of the first fight. You guys know I had a two-team parlay mixed in with Magomed. First leg cashed. I was on the way to cashing that easy parlay there before Magomed made a horrible decision to throw that knee. The fight should have never been stopped. You guys remember the whole situation. It was ridiculous. Johnny Walker saying some things that led the doctor to stop the fight. It was ridiculous. Magomed Ankalaev, this is a fighter. If he doesn't make a mistake after he's dominating Paul Craig, if he doesn't make that mistake at the last second to get subbed, if he stepped on the gas a little bit more so, even then I thought he deserved to kind of take that fight against Jan Blachowicz. Should have got the job done there. Then, if he doesn't make the mistake to throw that knee as Johnny Walker's grounded, I mean, you're talking about a fighter that he should be undefeated, right? This should be a guy that people are raving about as like the next John Jones. I mean, this should be a fighter that is, in my opinion, this should be a fighter that is now 21-0. He's so well-rounded. You guys know I've been saying he is the uncrowned king of the division. I've been saying that for a very long time. I'm not backing down from that right now. I'm saying Magomed Ankalaev will be the light heavyweight champion of the world soon enough. He just needs to get things cleaned up and just be a little bit more intelligent in there and just handle business. And he is skill for skill. I think that he's the best light heavyweight fighter. I think he's going to get the knockout finish on Johnny Walker. Johnny Walker has been looking very good as of recently, but we do know that once you are diagnosed with giraffe syndrome, it's uncurable and it always will be with you. You can kind of treat it and whatnot, but once you're diagnosed, you do have it for life. And Johnny Walker does have giraffe syndrome. We saw that in effect against Jamal Hill, against Corey Anderson. The point I'm making is he's very dangerous offensively, but at times he's vulnerable to be hit. And I could see Magomed Ankalaev clipping him and knocking him out. If he doesn't get that knockout, I still think Ankalaev is going to dominate with the grappling, and he will control this fight. Just needs to avoid that early danger. Needs to fight a smart fight, a very intelligent defensive matchup, and Magomed Ankalaev should be cruising to a victory here. But I think these guys are going to clash, and I think that Ankalaev is going to get a finish. I do. I think that if Johnny Walker brings that same energy as the last fight and he looks to close the distance and make it a war, I think Ankalaev will do something similar to what we've seen him do in the past. When you think about the Ian Cutelaba fights, just beautiful counter shots and eventually laying the mark and wobbling and hurting his opponent. And I think he could follow it up with the finish there. And as we look at Tapology's rankings for the light heavyweight division, of course, these are not the UFC rankings, but I find this interesting. Magomed Ankalaev, the #1 ranked light heavyweight fighter, even though he's not the champ. Alex Pereira ranked 4th. You got Yuri Prohaska, who just took that knockout loss. He's still ranked 2. I don't know about that, but he'll be facing off with Alexander Rakic April 13th. That'll be a great fight. And Jamal Hill rehabilitating himself, and a lot of big fights to be made in this division moving forward. But again, I believe Magomed Ankalaev is the best light heavyweight fighter on planet Earth, and it just needs to things just need to play out in normal fashion, right? We need to see no type of freak occurrences and weird things going on, and he's the fighter that will be getting his hand raised in these types of matchups, in my opinion. So excited to see how that plays out. And we take a look at the betting line. Ankalaev, a big-time favorite. On my bookies now at -550. I see them right around that -450 to -550 type of range. If you're getting it in the 400s, I like him as a parlay piece. You just gotta be wary what line you're grabbing. Once it's creeping up to 550, 600, it's getting a little too steep for me. But all in all, I think Magomed avoids the danger, and I think he notches in, your two-team parlay. I would say if you guys are looking to do something like that, I think that he's a decent piece. But check your book, see what line you can get. Also check finishing props, knockout props, unders. I think Johnny Walker will look to make it a clash. And I could see a finish one way or the other, but I think Ankalaev will be the fighter with that nice underrated defensive skills in the feet. I could see him countering and knocking Walker out like we've seen him hurt before. We've seen Walker hurt even before the UFC. We've seen him knocked out in devastating fashion. I think we see the giraffe syndrome coming into play and that head flopping back with some whiplash. All right, that's how I'm going with the main event. All right, guys, that's going to wrap up the card. I want to give you guys a big shout out for all of you that hung around through this entire video. You guys mean a lot to me. As I said in the beginning of this video, just bear with me as this was the first one I've done in a couple of weeks. I'm a little rusty here, and I cannot wait to crack out all the new equipment and fine tune it and show you guys what I'm talking about, and for you guys to see the different types of videos that I'm going to be putting out here on the channel and on my Instagram at MMA Fortune Teller _ and on Twitter at the MMA Teller. They're going to be getting a lot more content from me, and the content's going to look way doper. All right, guys. So this is a big year. I'm very motivated, and whatever you guys are going to be working on for the upcoming year, you know, I hope you're rocking with me and keep in touch with me throughout the comment section here on the channel. And I want you guys getting done what you guys need to get done as well. This is the year. I don't know. I'll say this before we depart. You know, I've never been that type of guy. I've never really been that guy that's like, oh, new year, new me. I'm doing this and that. This is the first time it's ever hit me like that in a long time, I would say, at least. So I'm very excited to show you my motivation with the channel. I am ready to really make a statement and for my channel to have an impact, you know, in the MMA world. I'm looking to make some big moves, right? I've been kind of just cruising with the channel, and you know, I'm watching some of these other guys, some of these stuff that's out there that gets a lot more views or a lot more likes, this and that, and I know I have way more potential than what I'm seeing from these other guys. You know, maybe I'm not putting in as much effort as some of these other guys, but now you're going to see that effort even more so, and I know I got a lot more to give to the game than what I'm seeing from some of these dudes out there. You guys know what I'm talking about. So you guys will see it. All right. So I wish you guys to have that same motivation and push forward with your goals for this year. Wish you guys a profitable event coming up this Saturday. And like I said, expect things to really be groomed out nicely, starting with the following event. We got a big one coming up, Strickland versus Duplessis. All right, guys. On that note, signing out. Teller.
Welcome to the show. This is the MMA Fortune Teller. Yeah.
The MMA Fortune Teller.
The teller.